Denver Broncos don't have an elite wide receiver. They've got Pat Bryant. What's going on, Broncos country? Welcome into our next Denver Broncos positional deep dive video for the 2025 season. I'm your host, Gage Madrid. On this series, we go in depth on each position group for the Denver Broncos, assess their strengths, assess their weaknesses, and determine how they're going to contribute for this upcoming season. Today, we've got wide receivers. It's very evident what direction the Denver Broncos want to go in terms of their wide receiver room. They are going towards a youth movement. The average age of this current wide receiver room is just 24 and a half years old. And even if you were to remove undrafted free agents from the equation, the average age is still just 24.6 years old. The Broncos are trying to get as young as they can in the wide receiver room to really help develop these receivers alongside their young franchise quarterback. You want Bo Nix and his receivers to kind of all grow together, essentially, and that's the model that the Denver Broncos are trying to follow. So before we get into this preview, guys, if you could just do me a big favor and leave a like on this video as well as subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and it helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this receiver preview here. And we're going to start things off, of course, with Courtland Sutton, the Broncos' de facto #1 receiver. And I know that a lot of people are questioning if Courtland Sutton is really a #1 receiver in the NFL. In my opinion, it's a little bit more of a nuanced conversation. It's more about what your defined role is in this offense. In terms of the alignment, any receiver could be the #1, 2, or 3 receiver on any given play, especially with how much the Broncos like to mix up their personnel groupings. But what is the defined role for each wide receiver in this offense? For Sutton, it's pretty clear. He is the X receiver for this offense. That means he lines up on the line of scrimmage, out wide. He lines up mostly against press coverage, so he's dealing with a lot of bump and run, that kind of stuff. You've got to be physical, you've got to be big, you've got to be aggressive, and you've got to be able to win when you're getting jammed at the line of scrimmage, and Courtland Sutton does a really good job at that. He reached 1,000 yards for the first time since 2019 last season. He had 81 catches last year for 1,081 yards and 8 touchdowns. 13th most amongst receivers in yardage and 12th most amongst receivers in touchdowns. 13.3 yards per reception and 17 20-plus yard plays, tied for 8th most in the NFL. In terms of how often he lined up where, 82.6% of his snaps came out wide, which was the 3rd most amongst 31 wide receivers with a minimum of 100 targets last year in the regular season. Just 17.2% of his snaps came in the slot, 29th out of those 31 receivers. So Courtland Sutton, again, his role is very defined as that outside X wide receiver, and he fills that role at a very high level, and he's got great chemistry with Bo Nix. That's the big reason why I want the Broncos to ultimately extend Courtland Sutton, because he and Bo are on the same page. Courtland's Bo's safety blanket. I think that is very important. One thing that is a little bit concerning is his drops. He had 10 drops last year, which was the 2nd most in the NFL amongst wide receivers, and 11.0 drop percentage, the 3rd highest amongst receivers. So you'd like Courtland Sutton to not drop some of those layups. You see him go up and make these crazy, insane catches, but then he'll drop a layup that should be caught 100 times out of 100. So that is one area of Courtland Sutton's game that is certainly a little bit frustrating. 1.84 yards per route run, which was 20th in the NFL. Just 185 yards after the catch, which is 30th. We all know that Sutton's more of a possession guy than he is a yard after catch guy, so that doesn't surprise you at all. He had 35 contested targets last year, which was the 5th most in the league, coming down with 20 of them. A 57.1 contested catch percentage, 11th best in the NFL. Really solid. Blocking was not great by Courtland Sutton. He had 314 run block snaps. Obviously, most of them were out wide, so those are going to mostly be blocks downfield. And he had a 31.8 PFF run blocking grade. One of the reasons why the Broncos' run game was so bad last year, one of the many reasons, is because they struggled to block from the wide receiver and tight end positions. So I'm hoping that can continue to improve as we go on. Hopefully Courtland Sutton can maybe get a little bit better in that area, but I'm also depending on some other guys who we're going to talk about later to fill that blocking wide receiver role. So overall, man, Courtland Sutton, is he a true number one receiver in the NFL? Probably not, but he is a good number one receiver for this team, considering how they like to mix up their personnel groupings. He is the best X receiving option that the Broncos have. He fills that defined role well, and ultimately I think he's going to get extended because of it. Now let's move on from Sutton here, and again, I want you guys to remember, we're thinking about defined roles for each of these players. We're not thinking about who's the number 2 receiver behind Sutton, who's the number 3 receiver, all that stuff. So the next player we're going to talk about is Devonta Vick and what his defined role for this team is. For Vick, he's essentially filling that Tim Patrick role. He's your big slot receiver. 69.5% of his snaps came in the slot. That's 10th most amongst 84 wide receivers with a minimum of 50 targets. 28.7% of his snaps came wide, mostly as the Z receiver, the guy who's going to be out wide as well, but he's generally on the other side of the X receiver, and he's lined up off the ball, unlike the X receiver who must have their front foot on the football on the line of scrimmage for it to be considered a legal formation. So that's the defined role there for Devonta Vick. When he's out wide, he's mostly in that Z role. 41 receptions, 64th in the NFL, 475 yards, 76th, and 3 touchdowns, 11.6 yards per reception. He was more working the short to intermediate areas of the field. He had 7 plays of 20-plus yards through the air, 65th in the league. Just 2 drops, really, really solid. A 4.7 drop percentage, which was 58th in the NFL, so that's really, really solid. You want that number to be lower, obviously. 1.51 yards per route run, which was 54th out of 84 receivers. 132 yards after the catch, so not too many yards after the catch for him. 15 contested targets, 9 contested catches, a 60.0 contested catch percentage, 15th best out of 84 receivers, again with a minimum of 50 targets. Really solid. In terms of his blocking, I will admit that his PFF grade is a little bit suspect. He had 117 run blocking snaps last year and just a 31.4 PFF run blocking grade, which is really bad. I thought that his tape showed some really nice flashes of being a decent blocker, but he did have some blown blocks as well. It did contribute to the poor run game for the Broncos, but overall, I thought Vick was one of your better blocking receivers last year. Still, though, you had one of the best blocking receivers in the NFL in Tim Patrick, and you decided to let him go. That is one area where you definitely suffered last year because of that decision. I'm thinking, though, that Pat Bryant is really going to be able to step in and help out in that area. We'll talk about Bryant a little bit later on in this video. Now let's talk about Marvin Mims entering his 3rd season with the Broncos, and his defined role is a little bit less clear because the Broncos didn't really have a joker last year, so they were using Marvin Mims as kind of like a pseudo-joker. 51.5% of his snaps came wide, which was 63rd out of 84 receivers with a minimum of 50 targets. 35% of his snaps came in the slot, 37th out of 84 receivers, and then 13.5% of his snaps came either in the offensive backfield or elsewhere. Remember, the Broncos put him in the backfield quite a bit to try to get him one-on-one matchups against linebackers and safeties, and that worked out rather well for them. Marvin Mims had 39 receptions for 503 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. 12.9 yards per reception. No doubt that number got inflated when they started to use him a little bit more as a deep ball threat. You think about those connections that he had with Bo Nix in the Cincinnati Bengals game. Just 7 20-plus yard receptions, so you're obviously hoping that that number can go up a little bit next year as you start to utilize him more and more as that deep threat. he'll line up at the Z receiver position as well, and that's when you can get him some one-on-one matchups where you can get him to burn somebody over the top. So, again, I'm hoping we see a little bit more of that from Marvin Mims next year. He had just 2 drops, a 4.9 drop percentage, really solid, 2.57 yards per route run, 4th best in the NFL. So, he definitely was efficient. I'm just hoping we see more of those big plays next year. Not too much in the contested catch area. 4 contested targets, just 1 contested catch. 78 run blocking snaps, a 55.4 PFF run blocking grade. So far, the best run blocking grade out of everybody in the wide receiver room. Again, I'm hoping that that's where Pat Bryant can shine. But Marvin Mims, now that the Broncos have some other players such as R.J. Harvey and Evan Ingram that can fill more of that Joker-type role, Mims can hopefully focus on just being Marvin Mims and being that deep threat Z receiver. No doubt they'll line him up in the backfield sometimes too, but having guys like Evan Ingram and R.J. Harvey are definitely going to take some of the pressure off of Marvin Mims next year, and I think that we might see an uptick in production because of it. And now we've got to talk about Troy Franklin, a player who definitely went through some rookie growing pains last year, and we've got to, of course, start off with the drops. PFF only credited him with 3 drops last year, a 9.7 drop percentage. There were a couple of them where it looked like he just wasn't quite on the same page with Bo. He wasn't quite in the spot where Bo needed him to be. Sometimes Bo would get a little bit too happy in the pocket with his footwork, and he would overthrow him as a result. So the connection just wasn't there between Bo and Franklin last year. Some of it was on Bo, some of it was on Franklin. I'm just hoping, above all else, that chemistry comes back from the University of Oregon. Franklin's defined role. Right now, I'd say it's the backup Z receiver. 65.4% of his snaps came out wide. 34.6% of his snaps came in the slot, so they did move him in there as well. His yards per route run is quite disappointing. 0.99 yards per route run, so not even 1 yard per route run. Tied for 86th out of 94 receivers in the NFL. The Broncos did try to manufacture Franklin some completions in space with swing passes and screens and stuff like that, but he still wasn't really able to make hay with it. That was definitely disappointing. His yak was also quite disappointing. Just 159 yards of yak. Contested catch on 5 targets, so not really a contested catch guy. 101 run blocking snaps, a 48.6 PFF run blocking grade. Smaller receiver, you're not going to really expect him to block too much. Hopefully that chemistry is able to be rekindled between Bo and Troy Franklin in the deep passing game, because coming out, I always thought that Franklin was just a pure straight line speed dude. He didn't really have much of a route tree. He's not going to be an elite receiver in that category. So he's just going to have to depend on running by guys, and you're not going to be able to last in that role if you can't track a deep ball. He's got to be able to track the deep ball. That was the biggest area that hurt him last year and hurt his overall production. I know that I keep gassing up Pat Bryant in this video, but the more and more that I watched his film preparing for the film study that I did after the draft, the more and more I fell in love with his game. I think that he's got some really high-end traits that could translate to the NFL at a very high level. And anytime you make a comparison to Michael Thomas, that's going to perk your ears up. And Sean Payton did just that in his post-draft press conference when the Broncos drafted Pat Bryant in the 3rd round out of Illinois. 54 receptions for 984 yards and 10 touchdowns. A whopping 18.4 yards per reception. As far as what the defined role for Pat Bryant is going to be in this offense, I think that remains to be seen, because he can play both the X and the Z receiver. He can play in line. He can play in the slot as well. He can move all over the field. Long term, I could see him as the potential replacement for Courtland Sutton as the X receiver. But I also want to get him in line and utilize his high-end blocking ability. He had a whopping 288 run blocking snaps last year, a 71.2 PFF run blocking grade, one of the top grades for run blocking amongst receivers in the country. He is a phenomenal contested catch guy. He had 13 contested targets, coming down with 9 of them. That's a 69.2 contested catch percentage, tied for 6th best amongst college receivers in the country. I think that Pat Bryant, if he's able to sustain that level of production as he comes into the NFL, obviously there's going to be a learning curve. NFL football and college football are really two completely different games. Once he does get over that learning curve, though, I think he could carve himself out a big role in this offense. He could maybe come in and he could out-snap a guy like Devonta Vick or Marvin Mims, depending on how much he develops in a short amount of time. But I really, really like Pat Bryant. Just one drop, a 1.8 drop percentage, 5th best in the entire country. This guy has traits that when you look at a receiver on film coming into the NFL, those are the traits that you want to look for. His contested catch ability, just his hands overall. You want to look at his blocking, all of that kind of stuff. Those are traits that can translate really well. And yes, he can run the slant route at a high level. That was Michael Thomas's specialty in the NFL. He's not Michael Thomas yet, but I'm not saying that he couldn't develop into Michael Thomas in a relatively short period of time. The Broncos felt that they got a massive steal being able to get Pat Bryant in the 3rd round, and the more and more film I watch of him, the more and more I feel like they did indeed get a steal. Now let's get into some of the more developmental guys on the roster, and Michael Bandy is still kicking around here in Denver. This is going to be his 3rd season in the orange and blue, 27 years old. Last season, he spent the entire year on the practice squad, didn't play any snaps. It's going to be a tough uphill battle for him to even make the practice squad this year, but we'll see what happens. I know that Bandy is a tough, hard-fighting, scrappy guy, so we'll see if he's able to stick around. We've got A.T. Perry, the mysterious wide receiver that still intrigues a lot of members of Broncos country. We're not going to see him out at training camp for a while, though. He was placed on the physically unable to perform list. He can be activated at any time, but we'll see what happens. He signed to the Broncos practice squad in October after being waived by the New Orleans Saints. Played 0 snaps for Denver last year. Again, probably going to be an uphill battle to make the team, but he's got some tools. He's a good contested catch guy as well. He's got some speed, so we'll see if Perry can make an impact if and when he comes back. Now moving into the 4 undrafted free agents, and I kind of ranked them in the order that I am intrigued by them. We got Courtney Jackson, who I think could carve himself out a role on special teams for this team and maybe make the 53-man roster as a result. He's an undrafted free agent out of Arkansas State, 5'11", 185 pounds. He's got legit 4.3 speed. Ran a 4.340 at his pro day. That speed translates on film. 42 receptions for 494 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2024. But with the new kickoff rules and having 2 kickoff return men on the field, I could see Courtney Jackson with that speed carving himself out a role on special teams as the second kick returner alongside Marvin Mims. Now, he's going to have to prove that he has reliable hands as a return specialist. That will come in due time. Joaquin Davis, he's got measurables that intrigue me. 6'4", 195 pounds. So anytime you have a bigger bodied receiver that has a contested catch radius, I'm automatically intrigued. Out of North Carolina Central, he had 31 receptions for 490 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2024. We've got Jerwan Newton out of Toledo, and he certainly had volume production last year. 72 catches for 1,033 yards and 11 touchdowns. 5'11", 192 pounds. So kind of the similar build as some of the other undrafted wide receivers. And then finally we've got Kyrese White, that same build, 5'10", 185 pounds out of Utah State. Last season he had 42 receptions for 526 yards and 3 touchdowns. So we'll see if one of these undrafted guys can maybe rise up the ranks, compete for a practice squad spot, or if they really impress, maybe a spot on the 53-man roster. In terms of how many wide receivers I think the Broncos are ultimately going to carry on the 53, I'm going to guess 5, and it's probably going to be Sutton, Vele, Mims, Franklin, and Bryant. And then you have to figure out what you're going to do with Trent Sherfield. Do you carry him on the active roster, or do you put him on the practice squad and then promote him each week, a la Michael Burton last year? That's very possible. And then we have these back-end guys here who are mostly going to be competing for practice squad spots. All right, Broncos country, let me know in the comments section below. How do you feel about this wide receiver depth, and who do you ultimately going to think is going to emerge as the number 2 receiver alongside Courtland Sutton? Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts, as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video, as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. And if you guys want to go above and beyond in supporting the channel, please consider becoming a channel member today. There are 2 tiers that you can choose from: the Ring of Honor tier for $2.99 a month and the Hall of Fame tier for $5.99 a month. Those are both ways that you can support the channel. Go that extra mile. It is not mandatory. You will get some perks and incentives in exchange for it, but if you don't want to support, that is more than okay. You will still get the same awesome content you are accustomed to here on this channel. Here are the instructions on how you can support. Additionally, the link to do so will be in the description down below if you can't find the join button in this instructional video. And I know some of you guys were struggling to find where this join button was, so I thought I'd hop in and show you guys real quick. So we are on my channel's homepage right here. If you guys just look up Broncos Syndicate and go to my channel, it'll take you to this homepage right here. And this is where the join button is, right here next to the subscribe. Let's just go ahead and click on a video real quick here. Consistency. And the join button is right here on the videos, right next to my title, or right underneath my title, and right next to my channel name and subscriber count. That's how it looks on PC. And then on mobile, it's not focusing well, but you guys can see that white button right there. It says join. It's not focusing, but that white button that's underneath the title next to my channel name, that is where it will be on mobile. So that's where these buttons are located on PC and mobile. I'm not sure how to do it on a smart TV or if you're on some sort of weird device like that, but that's where the button would be located on PC and on mobile. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.